Welcome to They Live by Film, a film discussion podcast focusing on the Criterion Channel and beyond. My name is Adam Lundy, and I am joined as always by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello, guys. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Just trying to survive all the temperature changes we're having here, where I think it'll probably snow next week, and it's going to be probably 70 today, and my allergies aren't going to take it. But beyond that, pretty good.
Okay, then we found our theme then. This is the allergy episode. Yeah, I'm like, it's killing me right now.
I have no allergies.
There's only like, I mean, isn't it like in Ireland, it's either feels pretty okay, but it's cloudy, or it's cold. Like, isn't that like the two modes in Ireland?
It's never even really that cold. You know, we're just constantly meh. You know, like the coldest we'll get in the winter. I had to put this into American money. I'm gonna need to convert this. Hold on.
I can sort of do it like in my head, if like give a rough estimate if you say it in Celsius.
Like in the winter time, if it's a really bad winter, it will get down to like maybe 2 or 3 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
I mean,
that's like a 40.
And then in the summertime, generally speaking, if it's a good summer, the average day will be like 20 to 25. You might get a week where it's like 30, and those are the weeks where I die.
That's like, so 28 is 82. I remember that. That's one conversion that I have just in my head.
28 is 82. Okay, so
that means that you're doing basically like, that's not that hot, but that's because you don't have AC anywhere, right?
No, big office buildings and stuff sometimes, but in homes, no, we don't.
Yeah, that's really hot then.
We don't need it.
Yeah.
So the fun fact, I'll step out there. -10 is the same in both Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Yeah, it's the only temperature that's the same between both.
How does the maths work for that? Is there not like a set difference, or is it done on percentages or something?
It's not a set.
So the conversion is 9/5 plus 32. And somehow that is the -10. That is the conversion between Fahrenheit and Celsius.
I always just assumed it was just like a set figure.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's an actual math formula for it.
Why? What's the point?
Why
do you guys ruin everything?
Hey, it's Vietnam too. It's not just
to be fair, I think we're actually one of the few places that still use Celsius. I think most of the world has changed to Fahrenheit. Like
unless you're in science, because science it's exclusively Celsius.
Yeah, right, I don't know if that's true, Adam. All respect. I think America's holding out on this. Like we just need to get to the metric system and just need to get to Celsius and just like stop pretending that we do things better here.
I just have a clear recollection on my first holiday to Spain as a child. I think I might have been maybe like 8 or 9, and we landed in Spain in Barcelona, and the pilot was like, and outside it's 100 degrees. And I was like, what? I'm going to die. It's 100 because I was just going off Celsius. So that sounded insane. That's literally boiling temperature. That sounded absolutely insane to me. So that's where my assumption on the world using Fahrenheit comes from. So I very much could be wrong in that. I'm not an expert in that field.
I don't know if this is just an old urban legend. It may be, but I've heard it my whole life. One of the reasons the U.S. hasn't went to the metric system is because Jefferson was interested in it, and he's like, I'm not going to change to the metric system unless I know what a kilogram is. So he ordered a weight that was a kilogram to come in so he could start the conversion, and it got lost in transit from overseas, like on a ship, and he just said, fuck it, it's not meant to be. It just never changed.
That's how most Americans make decisions. I mean, I think I'm okay with that description.
Brilliant. Well, look, we'll get cracking on the episode anyway. So it's kind of a weird episode. I don't really know how to call this episode without like sounding like I'm underselling the importance. But this is basically the racism episode.
Yep.
You know, it's a weird way to talk about it, but it is basically we talk about 2 films that deal, you know, with people who are subjected to racism and xenophobia and are basically outcasted by society because of their differences. So the first film we're going to talk about is a 1980 film from the UK called Babylon, directed by a guy called Franco Rosso, an Italian, but made this film in the UK. For those who are unaware of Babylon, which to be fair, it's kind of an obscurish film, I wouldn't be too surprised if you hadn't heard of it. I certainly hadn't when I got picked for the film club. But the movie centers around Brindley Ford's character Blue. He fronts a reggae sound system based in southwest London, and the film captures the trials and tribulations of young Black youths in troubled London in the early 80s. I remember actually one part about this film that we talked about, and that is fuck Margaret Thatcher. So now we can talk about the actual film now. I just wanted to get that out of the way real quick.
Just like a little bit of Tourette's for like Ireland, right? Like, got to point it
fuck
out.
Margaret Thatcher. Just every now and again, you just say it, and everyone around you agrees. So that's nice.
It's like a greeting. Yeah.
What do we think of Babylon, Chris? This was your choice, wasn't it? Wasn't this your poll?
It was. Yeah, I wanted to take advantage of the reggae films that they had on the channel that were leaving, I think, or maybe they're still there. Anyways, so this is an interesting movie if you think about kind of the makeup of it. So the world ranks it as the 5,133rd best movie. So it's kind of, it's well thought of by the people who know it, I guess, but it's certainly not on a lot of critics' list. And Franco Rosso is not a Jamaican. I'm pretty sure he wasn't even British. I'm pretty sure he was Italian.
He was Italian. Yes, he was indeed Italian.
And like actively Italian, not like an Italian living in Britain, but I'm pretty sure he was from Italy, right?
No, he was like legit an Italian guy. Like he didn't make a ton, like, to be honest. I'm pretty sure this is like his only feature film. Maybe he had another one, but he was mainly like documentarians and TV movies, that kind of stuff. But yeah, he was an Italian dude.
Which feels appropriate, right? Because I mean, like with a lot of Italian filmmakers, it seems like they transplant in a lot of other areas, especially in Europe. Like, you look at the spaghetti westerns being filmed in Spain and other parts. It's so common for them, and I couldn't even speculate the reason why, but that seems to be a big thing in Italy.
Maybe go where the money is, but I just think it's interesting that this guy from Italy makes a movie about racial tension in London, focused on a population of Black Jamaicans and their relationship with the British when they were living there. And there's a couple elements to this movie. There's also the criminal element we can get into, which I think is an interesting kind of nuance here. But just at a high level, the fact that the movie was made in this way, that there's certainly a risk when you go into this of having maybe like a kind of like an Anglo perspective on the whole thing, or like just maybe romanticizing certain elements of like Black culture. You see it sometimes where, like, that's a big critique of Black Orpheus, for example, right? Where this French guy comes in and kind of romanticizes like the favelas in Brazil, right? Mm-hmm. He makes it seem like it's fun to live in like the poorest parts of the city.
Yeah, turns into a fantasy kind of world.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think there's a risk of that, but I don't think that Rosso really did that. Like, I think he, at least from, again, as speaking as a white person, I want to be a little careful, but it felt like he was probably trying to be very authentic and let the characters and these, actors who were actually musicians in real life, some of them, kind of help create this story and tell this story and make it something that they were happy with. I think it shows up in the language like they use, the patois that they use. I think it shows up in the way that he doesn't portray them as perfect. He portrays them as kind of nuanced characters, like real characters who struggle with their family and struggle with the community. And so like, I don't know, like, I kind of really love this movie. Like, I think if you're going to have a mostly white crew come in and from Italy come in and make a movie like this, I feel like it was handled with the appropriate amount of nuance. And I think the topics that he wanted to sort of address really were brought up. I mean, especially when he starts getting into some of the Rastafari stuff. So I don't know. I think it kind of passes that test for me of trying to, pay respect to the subject matter you're filming and not putting too much of an Anglo kind of lens on it. And I personally love reggae, so I love the movie for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that's my intro to Babylon. What about you, Zach?
So this movie has a bit of a interesting thing for me from where I work in juvenile probation. I think I've mentioned that on here before. I work with kids who have entered the criminal justice system in one way or the other. We actually get reports, I want to say every quarter, if I remember correctly, where, of course, we are always attempting to analyze things like, are we being more harsh to one race versus another? Are we more or less harsh on different genders? And the statewide, and this is for statewide, and this is a big thing. And it gets of course, we do a thing where the issue we have in my state, which I won't take too long, is the east side of the state and the west side of the state are very different on how they do things, and our job is to try to make that one, but that's a whole nother topic. But there's a lot of stuff that goes in this report, but it is very interesting in working with kids of different races in general, of how you handle them and how, and it brings a lot of that in here, and I think there's a lot of true to life here. We'll get in more into the specifics of the movie, but like, there's the scene where he's kind of window shopping, just kind of not even window shopping. He's just walking down the street and he's looking in. He starts getting chased, has no idea it's the police, and he's arrested for running from the police. And that's stuff that does have a lot of relevancy. He's looked at differently for doing that versus what someone else could do. And I think it's very interesting. And I think it's a nuance that is something else. Yeah, they're doing maybe some petty stuff, but nothing that would, really recall anything beyond even small reprimands at this point, but not full out arrested and put into the system and things such as that. So I thought, from that lens, I think it's incredibly fascinating. It's one I've gotten to think about. How long ago did we watch this? Like a month ago? It's been a while now.
Yeah, at least. So it was when I had COVID, so about a month, about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, so it's a movie that stayed with me, and I think that says a lot. With that much time has passed, and it's I feel like it has a lot of interesting areas it's exploring. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I thought it was fantastic. I think out of all the films we've watched over maybe like last 6 or 7 weeks, it was probably my favorite. I do have a couple ranked higher, but those are films I'd already seen. So out of all like the film first time watches I've had from the club in the last sort of 6-7 weeks, this was definitely my favorite. I agree with you, Chris, even though again we're talking from an outsider perspective, as sort of white people, and we didn't grow up in England in the 80s, we don't really know for sure how it was, but it feels very authentic. Both from the actual filmmaking point of view, has that kind of French New Wave kind of looseness to it. It's not very sort of strictly choreographed or photographed or anything like that. It does have that looseness to it, that almost documentary style to it. And then also from the fact, as we said, with the characters all being portrayed by people who were sort of growing up, I don't doubt they probably had a large involvement with crafting their character,
right?
And obviously the lingo, the dialogue that they used, was it Patois? Is that who? Patois? Yeah, that sort of what's the word I'm looking for? That dialect that they sort of speak in, that without subtitles you would probably have a hard time understanding. I definitely would have had a hard time without the subtitles. Even with the subtitles, there was some sentences where I'm like, I think I know what they mean when they say that. But it's a look at a period of time and a very specific group of people that you don't often see. As a marginalized group of people, first, second, third generation immigrants into the UK. Ironically enough, all would have been original byproducts of the slave trade, bringing people, to Jamaica and other British colonies and in the Caribbean, and they then come to England hoping for a better life. And, that kind of deeply ingrained sort of hurt and sort of pain from that ancestral stuff still kind of rings true. They're still treated like absolute dirt by the majority of the white people they come across in this film. And Zach mentioned it as well, how during scenes like especially when the police chase them for no real reason and stuff, it fucking sucks that this is still so relevant today. And I feel like I say that with every film that involves racism, and it's more and more frustrating that I keep having to say how relevant that this stuff is today. The world's a very broken place. But I don't just want to focus on the racial aspect. I think Babylon is also an excellent celebrator of that culture, especially the music side of things and the rest of the rest of what's the rest of
Rastafarian.
Rastafarian, that's it. Yeah, the Rastafarian culture and stuff like that. I think it is also a very good celebration and an insight into that side of the world as well. So I think it works great on two angles, both celebrating, dub music, the music that they do, which is sort of like an electronic version of reggae, the dub music, the Rastafarianism, and also the other side of the coin, the xenophobia and the hardships that they were put through for no reason at all, other than the fact that they were black.
Yeah, there's even a scene where there one of the spiritual scenes when I think it's Blue is walking, and he kind of comes across that group playing music on the street, and there's like that leader that's dressed in Ethiopian colors, who becomes almost like a spiritual guide to him of sorts.
Yeah,
they're playing the drums, and it's mostly just drums, and that's the Nyabingi drums. So that's the music that sort of helped create reggae. Like they knew these Nyabingi drums were drums from Africa, and some people started like kind of getting into that rhythm and then sort of adding music on top of it in different ways, and that became reggae. So there's like a ton of history just like baked into this movie. And which I think is interesting. Even the fact that he's wearing Ethiopia colors, like, there's a direct tie in Rastafarian to Ethiopia, because they believe that this guy named Haile Selassie was the reincarnation of kind of like the Messiah, like the Christ figure. He came back to save the world and to bring back this kind of racial harmony, and to bring to save the world. I mean, like they thought the Messiah came back basically, and there's some that still believe he didn't die, and it's like a central part of that religion. So there's just a lot of respect paid like to the detail behind this journey that these characters are going through, that I don't know, I really liked, I guess. I thought it was handled really well.
And it's very respectful of especially the fact that, like we said, this was written and directed by a white Italian man. Mm-hmm. Obviously I don't know too much about him. He may have had closeness to that culture. He could have been friends or partners with someone who was a part of that culture. But for someone who wrote this and directed this as an outsider, it's very sort of respectful of that culture. I watched I Walked with a Zombie recently enough.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you guys have seen that one, the Jacques Tournier film, and that's very respectful of voodoo, especially for a film made in like, I think it was like the 40s. You'd expect it to be very sort of racially iffy when it comes to depicting Jamaican voodoo or no, Haitian voodoo, sorry. But it wasn't. It was very respectful in terms of like there was clearly a lot of research done prior to sort of filming and writing certain scenes, and I feel like the same was done here as well. It's very respectful. It doesn't try and I can't think of the right word here, but trivialize it. It doesn't try and trivialize their sort of beliefs and their religion and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Just on the aspect before we go too much deeper into the the horrible things that happen in this film, just want to touch on the music a little bit, because during the Spirited Away episode I talked about how much I enjoyed the music in that, and I had a similar sort of feeling with this film. I really enjoyed the music that came through. I don't have a massive experience with dub or reggae music. I do have one particular story that I can tell if we have time, about my only one time that I experienced sort of dub music sort of live. But I don't think we've ever really talked too much about our sort of musical tastes or anything like that. Chris, I know you're a big punk fan. I know you've brought that up before, but I don't think we've talked too much about our own sort of music that we like, and if we like the music in this film.
So I'll start. This is definitely far and away what I would normally listen to. I did enjoy it in the film. It wouldn't be something I necessarily go out and listen to on my own. A lot of mine, I listen to growing up as a teenager, and I still have a lot of this I still listen to now. I listen to a lot of grunge. I grew up in the '90s, so I listen to Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, Nirvana. That was Green Day. If we go into the punk era, I listen to a lot of that. Most of what I listen to now, though, is a lot of folksy type stuff I never thought I would listen to, but kind of the main thing now. Of course, if it's country, it's old country. I listen to a lot of Hank Williams Jr. I listen to Johnny Cash, of course, stuff like that, Willie Nelson. But yeah, so not my thing, but I enjoyed listening to it. It didn't. I'm not going to be one of those people who says, "Well, it's just noise," but because I mean, it's pretty cool. I definitely see the appeal.
What was the singer for Stone Temple Pilots? What was his name?
Oh God, you're
Scott
at.
Weiland. Scott
Thank you.
Weiland.
I was like, I'm gonna have to Google it. I can't remember.
He always had one of my favorite voices. I love the way that guy would growl and kind of like when he really got excited. I think he had a great voice.
I have a friend who makes fun of me all the time because of my love for Pearl Jam. Because he just like you can't understand things like you can once you've like conditioned yourself to it. It makes sense.
I was about to say, like every Pearl Jam song is just heard a sweet when the bird. That's just like every Pearl Jam song.
That's
I have no fucking idea what I can't remember his name actually. Now.
I guess that's my version of screamo. Like it's like no one can understand it. It's like, but I can understand.
Oh, Eddie Vedder though. Eddie Vedder is the voice of an angel though. I love that guy's voice. Oh my gosh. And then my favorite one from that era. Do you remember the guy Chris Cornell? I think from Soundgarden.
Yeah.
Oh man, if that voice was a woman, I'd marry it in like a second.
Yeah, he had an incredible voice. I'm not a big grunge guy, but I can sort of respect. I respect the craft.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chris Cornell had a quite an incredible voice.
It was an interesting snapshot into like the late '80s, early '90s, like grunge music, and like its lasting effect, but how it also just kind of stayed there. So it's kind of weird in that way.
Yeah, it's very much a time capsule genre. One of those kind of
Burden in My Hand. That's the song. You know that song Burden in My Hand from Soundgarden is like, I lost my head again. Like that, the way he sings that song. I remember I was like, so I used to listen to a lot of top 40 radio and like build Legos. That's about how old I was. I was like 11, 12, and I would just have like top 40 radio on. And maybe that was even like slightly later. I can't remember exactly when it came out. But as Soundgarden, as a lot of this grunge music started coming on, I remember I liked it. It was nice to have in the background or whatever. But when that song came on, I like stopped what I was doing and I like had to find it. I like had to figure out like who this guy was and who this band was. Anyways.
Before we for the grunge thing, I had him. You saw the Batman recently. How'd you feel about having to hear that same Nirvana song about?
Yeah, I literally saw it last night. I saw Batman last night. The song's fine. That must be from their MTV Unplugged session or something? Was that?
It's either that one or it's in. I don't think it's in Utero. I don't think it's in that one.
I just know because I don't know if because there was like a string section at some point. It was kind of acoustic, so I just assumed it was from Unplugged. I have no idea.
That Unplugged is awesome. That's one of my favorites from them. But I can't remember if they did it in that one or not.
Yeah,
they did a lot of covers in that one.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a big Nirvana guy. I was when I first got into like rock music when I was like 13, but yeah, I wouldn't call myself a big Nirvana guy. What annoyed me, just to do a quick segue on the Batman, I promise we'll go back to Babylon. I saw everyone was like bigging up the score in the Batman. I was like, oh, the main theme is so good. The main theme is just Imperial March, just kind of slow.
I mean, it is.
It's the Darth Vader music, but just a little bit slower. And I was like, is this it? This is just the Darth Vader music. This is just din, 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 din. But like they took one of the notes out.
I liked I wasn't really, when I talk about the music, it's for me it was more like I think there was one called like In the Anger Zone and stuff like that, which a lot of it's using the progression. I guess the word is progression from the Something in the Way. Obviously they knew they were going to use that because that's in there. But I like Giacchino. Maybe it's where I'm not, I kind of like him more than Zimmer, so I kind of put him a little bit more on a pedestal in the recent years.
Yeah, look, I had no overarching issue. Well, I could talk about my issues with the Batman for a while, so that's not. Let's
We'll
get back
save
to
that for any
Babylon.
other business, right?
Perhaps we will. Perhaps we. I don't have anything prepped as of right now, so perhaps I will save that for any other businesses. I do have a couple of issues with it.
Well,
So back to Babylon, maybe.
yeah, just quickly, I'll say I love rebel music. I've always been drawn to rebel music, so that's one of the reasons I got into punk. I love it when the lyrics are fighting against something. I think there's, and I'm part of it was because I've always been an activist, but I also just like passion in the music. I love it when it's like a personal song, and that applies to most genres. It doesn't have to be reggae, it doesn't have to be punk. Um, uh, I just like these. Like one of my favorite punk bands is a Canadian group called Propagandhi, and it's just every single song there's like an anger to it. And the guy's, I mean, he's probably in his 50s now, but he still finds things to be passionately angry about. And it's always impressed me that he's been able to maintain that passion for so long. But it is one of the reasons I'm drawn to reggae. I think there's something behind it that is usually like either celebrating the culture and the religion, and trying to make Rastafari like something personal, with the whole like I and I and I and I, like very tied into this like collective we kind of like we're doing this together. Or then it's talking about the oppression and the difficulties of living in Jamaica in that time. So yeah, and then the other thing I like is if you give me a syncopated rhythm, I'm yours. Like, y'all know this genre kind of called math rock or math punk? Like all day long. If it's fast and chaotic, but there's a like a meaning to it, like it kind of makes sense. Like I'm right there. So that's my big. Before we talk about Babylon quickly, what are you, Adam? What's your style?
Bonus points if you say your own music.
Leak House.
Well, look, I'm definitely in Zach's field. I'm like, I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to reggae or dub. I will tell my quick dub story in a moment, but generally speaking, I don't want to sound like boring, but I genuinely am one of those guys who kind of listens to everything. I'm very much more a case where I'm not picky with my genre, but I'm very picky with my artist. So like, I can't say I'm a big hip hop fan, but I am a huge like Kendrick Lamar fan or Wu-Tang Clan. I very much love very specific artists within genres.
Yeah.
Or math rock. I can't say I'm a big math rock fan, but I really like American football. So, there's very specific artists and genres that I really like. So I can't really call myself a particular genre fan. Like growing up, I was mainly into rock and punk. I was a big pop punk fan, so a big Fall Out Boy fan here. I still listen to Fall Out Boy all the time because they're awesome.
Can't let it go.
But only their old stuff. Only their old stuff. None of that new shit. Yeah,
you look like a good Charlotte type of guy. I don't know why. You just come off.
Yeah, I didn't mind. Yeah, good Charlotte. Yeah, I would have listened to Good Charlotte a bit when I was like 15. Yeah,
okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
I would have listened to a good bit of Good Charlotte. I can't say I know what they're doing nowadays, but I would have listened to a good bit of Good Charlotte, Blink-182, Fall Out Boy, Paramore, those kind of groups.
Paramore was great. I hadn't thought about them in a while.
Yeah, I would listen to those a lot as a teenager. Obviously, less so now. If I'm turning on something now, it's probably Kendrick Lamar or Radiohead or Bon Iver, stuff like that. So very different stuff. I've named three very different artists, but I'm more into that kind of stuff these days. But just with dub, so like I didn't even know like dub was a thing. I'd never heard of dub at all. And then about I want to say maybe about 5 years ago when I was maybe longer now, maybe about 6 or 7. It was when I was in my early 20s. There was this music venue in the city I lived in Waterford in Ireland, and it was a cool venue. I used to play there a bit on like open mic nights and stuff. But they used to put on like all kinds of shows. It was all very off the beaten path kind of stuff. And one night I got a text message from one of my buddies, and he's like, you want to come down to Central Arts? That was the venue. Come down to Central Arts. There's a dub night going on. It's bring your own beer and whatever. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea what dub is. I know he was very much a techno guy. He was into like electronic music, techno, that kind of stuff. So I just assumed it was going to be like dance music night. So I was like, all right, I'll come down, and I'll bring a few beers and I'll just chill out and meet some people. And I went in and I was like, what is this music? Because it was like, it sounds like reggae, but it's not. It's like there's like electronic beats behind it. It's very bassy. And next thing, like there's these people sort of like just shouting, like and talking over, and I'm like, this is nuts. And then like the main act of the night, this dude called Ras Tilly, I'll never forget him until the day I die. He was huge. I'd say he was about 7 foot tall. Jamaican guy, the big, the big hat that the Rastafarians wear.
Yep.
A big like, proper like Ethiopian garb, sort of similar to the character that we see in the film. It's just like this big tall dude. And he played for about an hour, and it was one of the best nights I've ever had, like at a music venue, because everyone was just so chill. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the place absolutely stunk of weed. It was the place. I came home, like I'm not a weed guy or anything like that, and I came home stinking of marijuana. But it was just, everyone was so chill and just like quietly just like bopping away to this music, and it was insane. It was one of the best nights I've ever had. And like, but like, I can't say I've ever sat down and listened to dub music ever again, because I don't want to kind of taint the memory of that night that I had. It's just something that I feel like will be much better live than it would be, sitting at home with your headphones on, kind of a thing. It's more of an experience, if that makes sense.
Cheaper to get the secondhand than it is to go recreate that experience yourself.
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, that's my experience with dub music, and it was really fun to sort of hear that and sort of watch that, because that scene at the end, when they're at the dub venue, like that's literally what that night was like, minus the cops coming and shutting it down, obviously. But that was very much a recreation of what it was like, people just sort of embracing, the message being shouted across the mic with this really cool music.
So this is one thing I really liked about the movie. I kind of want to, maybe it's a great tie into what you just said. So maybe, at first I thought this was a critique of mine from the movie, because but I think I've come around on this in the few weeks since we've seen it. So the kids, like the main sort of point of the movie is that these kids are just trying to perform their music live for, like, get ready for a competition, right? And in order to support that desire to like go compete and be the best, they steal some sound equipment, right? And I think one of the guys even gets involved a little bit in like the criminal kind of underworld and beats somebody up for money, some of these kind of things. But like the majority of them are just fully in it for getting ready for this competition and being the best reggae group in the city, right? As judged by this competition. And at first I thought that was like maybe like kind of a loose, maybe not a very strong premise to build this movie off of. But then the more I thought about it, I actually really love it, because I think it kind of puts us in the mindset of where a lot of 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids are, right? Or maybe early 20s. Like usually your focus is much more narrow in life at that time. And like, it makes sense that if you're really into music and you want to be known as like a musician, that probably is your whole life, right? And every chance you get, you're sneaking away with your friends to go to like some old warehouse and like put on a record and just like, bullshit for an hour or 3 hours and like wake up the neighbors with their music. Like it's very true to being like a teenager or like a young adult with like a very singular focus. And so I actually think the more I kind of like just reflect on the movie, I think that's actually a strength of it in a way, because I think it adds an innocence to like a lot of what the kids are doing. Because they're just young kids that like, they just, they play their music too loud. They do get involved in small crime to get ready for this comp. But other than that, they're extremely relatable. They're friendly. They love to joke around. Like they're just kids. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I think that came across very well in the movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's that idea of, when you're young and you want to be, you want to make it, that kind of way. You see it, in other sort of media, maybe about like, a young band, they're just trying to make it, trying to get the record deal, or, they're trying to get signed, or trying to play one awesome show, that kind of thing. And this is kind of different because they're not so much in it for the monetary aspect. They're not really doing it to get signed by a major label. It's much more a pride aspect. Yeah. They want to be respected. They want to show pride in their ability to showcase their music and also their connectedness to sort of Rastafarianism in general, and to be able to maybe be the best at that. So it's kind of different in one respect, because the end game is kind of different. They're not doing it to get signed by that major label, to get that record deal or whatever. They're doing it because they want to be the best at what they do, and at something that's so integral to their community.
Yeah. If this was a Hollywood movie, there would be an agent in that show that was like watching them being like, oh, they're good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And every sentence would be like, we just got to make it, man. We're going to get signed by a major label, If it was some shitty fucking 80s movie, like, or even like something like fucking Rock of Ages, that kind of shit.
See, I was going to reference Back to the Future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it doesn't work for you, but your parents, your kids, they're gonna love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a very, like, yes, absolutely. That's their end game, is to put on a kick-ass show, but it's not to get signed. It's to get the respect of their peers and have pride in their abilities, which is cool. It's something that you don't get a lot of these days, because now everyone kind of has a monetary end game. People are less interested in putting on a great show for the sake of putting on a great show. It's so that they can get the clout, to get the money. That's what it's kind of all about. Is people sell out and stuff. I know a lot of people personally, even in the music scene, who don't listen to the type of music that they play. They're doing it because they're hoping to get signed and get some money, and whatever. Like, that you do you. That's fine. If you're okay compromising your own sort of vision, then you do you. But Babylon is a film of people where that wouldn't even come into their heads to compromise their vision in hopes of getting signed by a label or whatever.
Yeah, that reminds me of do you remember this old British band called Gang of Four?
Yeah.
So I got to see they had a reunion tour maybe 15 years ago or something, roughly, and I got to see them. And when you speak about passion behind the music, it was like this out-of-body experience, because even into his 50s or 60s, the singer, like, he got into the music and wound up breaking his guitar on stage, some of the stuff that they were kind of famous for when they were 19 or whatever. And it just felt like so real that, like, they never, like, nothing had ever changed. They were in it for, like, the passion, I don't know. It was a great experience.
Yeah, Gang of Four are one of those groups from that sort of post-punk era that definitely never sort of sold out or anything like that. That would have been cool to see them live. I think maybe the guitarist or maybe the singer, maybe both, I think died a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Sorry, you said that he died recently?
I think someone in the band died.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was him, the singer, or whether it was just a guitarist or something. But I know someone in the group died recently enough.
Yeah, but anyways, I mean, and there's a lot of bands like that Fugazi's another. That sort of like everything they do was from passion. I mean, they're still living, but that era kind of brought up a lot of the music. And I think there's another, if we're kind of going between genres here, did you know, or do you remember a few years back when 3 6 Mafia won an Academy Award?
No.
It was amazing. Like, go back if you have a second, like, go back and watch this video, because here's this, like, hip hop group that's known for being very rebellious and having, like, some really kind of extreme lyrics, and just like, but they're actually very talented musicians. And they, for the soundtrack for a movie, they won an Academy Award for the score, And when they got on stage, they were like little kids. They couldn't believe that they were being recognized in this really, like, black tie, white environment. And It was like this authentic joy that you don't really see on stage that much. It was like the sweetest, like, all I wanted them to do was win another 10 Academy Awards, because you could see it, like, every part of their body was just like, we're here. Like there was no pretense. It was amazing. So anyways, not to go too far down that path, but I just think, like, when you see that art, I think that passion, for me, I always am really drawn to that. Like, they're in it for the reasons of, like, they want to make the music. I believed in this movie that everybody here was in it for the reasons that they wanted to really just create this, like, beautiful music and create something unique and be known. And then maybe to tie it into some of the other themes from the movie, they also was really important for them to be connected to their culture in a way that maybe they weren't allowed to be otherwise, right? Like, it actually had an element of, like, when they were living in London, they were not recognized as Jamaican. They were not recognized as people that, were this Rastafarian culture, at least there was no respect tied to that. And so they use this music as then a way to escape and feel like connect with themselves in a very authentic way. Speaking about the ills of consumerism and the problems from Babylon, I'd like to talk about Collection Corner now and the things I'm spending money on, and the things that we're all spending money on. So this is kind of a, March is where I think a lot of these labels start to turn up the sales and start to want that cash starting to flow back in. So I feel like, I don't know how y'all, but I feel like in the last 2 weeks there's been so many sales, flash sales from Criterion. Vinegar Syndrome had their package, that's normal, but they had a big one from another big sale from Kino, and then there's one more kind of major one. But yeah, it feels like there's people trying to take advantage of this kind of March timeframe, getting ready for the rest of the year. I'm really excited for what Vinegar Syndrome's doing. I know I've said this before, but if you look at the movies that are coming out from their March releases, there's a bunch of movies that are just very exciting coming out. So Yellow Veil, this company that's putting out a lot of foreign kind of like new horror movies, has a film coming out called The Long Walk, which is supposed to be excellent. And then this Canadian International Pictures, they have that release called The Other French New Wave with a beautiful cover. Have y'all seen that cover?
Saw the cover, yeah. It looks really, really nice.
Yeah, so a lot of respect being paid towards those movies coming out in the 60s. Pathogens coming out from AGFA. Have either one of y'all seen that movie?
I haven't seen it. I know what it is, but I haven't watched it.
I haven't seen it either, but it's interesting. Like I think it was a 12 or 13-year-old that wrote it and made it. And so it's a pretty gruesome horror movie, I think. So that's kind of fun. I'm excited to see that one. Anyways, I could go on and on. I just love that their partner labels are stepping up in a big way and having some very exciting releases. And then I think we might have even talked about this in the a little bit on the episode where we talked about Spirited Away. But when you start getting main titles like Schizoid, with Klaus Kinski, X-Ray, which is an underrated, really fun slasher.
Super excited for that, yeah.
Right. I just kind of geeking out about Hard Rock Zombies and Slaughterhouse Rock. Those are fun, really kind of obscure rock and roll horror movies. There was like that little genre that was there for a while. And then Reform School Girls is like the art house darling of the women in prison movies. And it's this Tom DeSimone is a respected director. And anyways, it's I think that Vinegar Syndrome just teased their halfway to Black Friday sale. Apparently there's going to be some massive, really well-known titles there. So I feel like, they've kind of come full circle now or come into their own a little bit. And they started out making a lot of VHS era classics, and there was the lesser known films in that, which they've kind of focused on for a long time. And now I feel like they're getting more into the more and more, well-known movies. So I don't know. I just can't wait to see what Vinegar Syndrome does as they continue to grow and have money to support them. So that's one that I've been collecting. And then the other thing I'll talk about is very quickly is the Criterion Flash sale. So that was a fun one for me. I wound up getting about 10 movies this time, all in. And it was a chance for me to kind of fill up my catalog a little bit. Did y'all partake in the flash sale?
No, I have. When I get to mine, I have something expensive coming in, so I had to refrain.
Oh, nice.
I can't because Criterion are dicks and don't ship outside of the US. So.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, that's why you give your coupon away sometimes, right? For those things.
Yeah, because Criterion themselves, it's fine. Like during the Barnes and Noble sales, Amazon will price match, so I can go on there then. But when I can never buy directly from Criterion because they just refuse to ship internationally.
Hopefully,
because I'd like to support them, but no.
Yeah, that's too bad. This one I picked up. I'll just quickly touch on it then, since I don't want to rub it in. but Duvivier film, Pepe Le Moko, a Lubitsch film, Trouble in Paradise, a Bresson film, La Dame de Bois de Boulogne. I don't know exactly the best way to say that.
Yeah, Artificial Eye released that one here, actually. I know the one you're talking about, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then Night and Fog, which have y'all seen that? It's about...
No, I haven't seen it. It's Rene, isn't it? Alain Rene?
Yeah, I believe so. It's the one that's... I actually don't know the director on that, which is kind of weird, but...
I'm 99% sure it's Rene, yeah. The guy who
it's
did,
the one about the Holocaust.
Yeah, it's the guy who did Hiroshima Mon Amour.
Okay. Yeah, anyways, it's a beautiful movie. I'm just kind of embarrassed I don't know the director, but yeah, Alain Rene, yeah, exactly. It's a very heartbreaking movie, but an important one, I guess, so to speak. So yeah, that's me. That's what I've been collecting. What about y'all?
Mine's pretty...
I think both of ours are quick. You can go, Adam.
I think both of ours are quick. Yeah, well, look, mine is quick because I don't really have anything that I've brought in recently that I think is worth really talking about. Just been picking up things here or there. So I'm going to default to something that I always default to when I have nothing to talk about. And luckily enough, Indicator have helped me out by last week announcing Columbia Noir number 5. I think I've talked about every Columbia Noir release so far on this podcast. So if it's not broken, don't fix it. So Columbia Noir number 5 was just announced. It's going to be released in June, and it's subtitled Humphrey Bogart. So it's kind of really interesting because so far, the Columbia Noir, 1 to 4, they've all been, just a pretty random collection of films, whereas this one is specifically sort of focused and geared towards Humphrey Bogart. So there's 6 films included, one of which I'm super excited about, and there's one that I feel like Indicator are cheating. So there's Dead Reckoning, which is by a dude called John Cromwell, not familiar with. The one I'm really excited about is Knock on Any Door, because it's directed by Nicholas Ray. So we know we're Nick Ray fans on this podcast, hence the name of the podcast. Tokyo Joe by a dude called Stuart Heisler, Sirocco by a dude called Curtis Bernhardt, and then there's the one that's cheating, which is called The Family Secret by Henry Levin. Do you guys know why I think it's cheating?
Why?
Humphrey Bogart's not in the movie. It was
Did he at least produce it?
Not really. It was made by his production company.
Oh, jeez.
So,
they're like, we need one more.
Yeah, so basically they must have just like, shit, we need one more film. We need to try and tenuously connect us to Bogey any way we can. And the last one is one he is in called The Harder They Fall by a dude called Mark Robson. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Columbia Noir sets. I've obviously been a big supporter of Indicator in general on this podcast. Something that I hope to address quite personally soon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hintedy, hinted, hint about a future episode, perhaps. But yeah, Columbia Noir number 5 is going to be out in June. It'll be a day one buy for me. I haven't pre-ordered it yet, but it will be when I get paid. So,
realistically, how many more of these do you think they're going to be able to squeeze out?
Well, if there are other sort of volumed sets like the Hammer sets and stuff for anything to go by, just pretty much any of them they can get their hands on. Mm-hmm. I don't really see it ending, and because there's probably hundreds of these films would have been produced throughout like the 40s, 50s. Hundreds and hundreds of these movies would have been produced. Like, these are all mainly B pictures that they've been putting out so far. Like, 1 or 2 have been films that do have a lot of sort of recognition after the fact, but they all like would have been like B pictures. So it just depends on how many survived and they can get a decent restoration of, really. So
can I just very, very without any spoilers give a little bit of insight into what's coming? So part of Indicator being so gracious and allowing us to do an interview with them coming up, they wanted to have a preliminary conversation just to kind of get to know us and just make sure, I think, just kind of check on how the interview is going to go, some of those kind of things. And they tease something, which I know is okay to talk about, and I'll kind of tease here. There may be another box set or 2 from Columbia Noir, but before the year is over, they're going to have a new series with a different studio that they've just signed the rights to, and they're actively producing. And so he said for fans of Columbia Noir, it's going to be a very exciting announcement. And I can't say any more, obviously, because Indicator's always very tight-lipped of their releases. But I'll just kind of leave that out there as a teaser. Maybe we can get into it a little bit more when we record. That interview should drop in late April, I think, by the way, in terms of timing for when that's going to actually be heard.
Good deal.
Yeah. What about you, Zach?
This year is the 50th anniversary of the first Godfather film. So, as expected, Paramount is doing their 4K release, which kind of everyone saw coming once they started doing 4K. And it was like, well, it's year 47. They'll wait 3 more years to do the 4K. And they were right on the money there. But they're putting out 2 box sets this year. One is a standard box set for the 4K, and then one's a collector's edition. I have the collector's edition coming in. I have a lot of love for the first 2 films. I'll actually be seeing the 50th anniversary new restoration very early April. So a couple weeks from now, I'll be seeing it in theaters for the first time. Great box set, though. It comes in this like faux leather size of like a record. Like if you had a record set, real thick, tall, wide, and it comes with like 3 prints, one from each movie of I think 2 of them, or one is for the first one's for Marlon Brando's Vito Corleone, and then the second one is Robert De Niro's Vito Corleone, and then it's Michael from the third movie that exists. But they're great looking prints. They put a lot of work into them. Gonna have all the 4K releases. They even put both the new cut of Godfather 3 in 4K and the theatrical cut in 4K, which the thing that was kind of interesting there is you can kind of see where Coppola, how he feels, because the theatrical 4K is now just on the bonus disc. And when you go into the main part for the third one, it's going to just be his new cut.
Wow.
Which isn't even significantly different. It's slightly different beginning, slightly different end, and a couple scenes cut here and there. I mean, it's a better movie in comparison, but you can't really take out a lot of the issues of the third film, even though it's not like awful. It's not an awful movie. It's just comparing to the first 2 Godfather films, it's kind of meh. But I'm super excited to get it. It looks like a great set. That should be here Tuesday. So I'll have to try to restrain myself from not watching it immediately, since I'll be going to the theater in 2 weeks.
That sounds great, though. That's cool. I'll have to check that out. You said it's from Paramount?
Yeah, it's if you look it up, like I said, the one I'm getting is the collector's edition. It's a 5-disc set, I think, because I believe it's all, each movie has its own 4K, and then there's 2 bonus discs maybe. So
is this the set where they do the 4K and the Blu-ray together, or is just only
overseas? The US is only getting a 4K.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's it's a 9-disc set, I think, overseas.
Oh wow. Okay.
All right, and welcome back. Now we're going to be discussing Rainier Werner Fassbinder's 1974 film Ali, Fear Eats the Soul. A lonely widow meets a much younger Arab worker in a bar during a rainstorm. They fall in love to their own surprise, to the outright shock of their families, colleagues, and drinking buddies. So this is kind of going more of our theme, what we're talking about. This one adds a little bit too. So while we'll be talking about, of course, the racism aspect, also I think there should be an interesting discussion on age differences in relationships. So let's go with Chris. What did you think? Yeah,
man. So the world has this as the 142nd best movie of all time. It's always interesting for me. I don't know how y'all feel, but when it's a quiet movie in the sense of from a production standpoint, there's not a ton going on, right? It's almost documentary style in the shooting. It's minimal, I guess, maybe is a better word than quiet, but when it's kind of a minimal shoot with a few actors, not telling a grand tale, but telling like a very simple story. I think for the movie to catch the attention of critics in that way, it has to be doing something extremely powerful from a storytelling perspective, or maybe unique from a storytelling perspective. And I think this film does that for me. It's don't have a ton of experience to Fassbender. I've maybe seen 6 or 7 of his movies. But he's he's another one of these guys. I was kind of talking earlier about liking rebel music. I think he's a little bit of a rebel filmmaker. Like, I think he's very much his own. He's very much an auteur. You're able to get, it's a Fassbender movie within 10 minutes of turning it on. And I think this one is maybe one of his most like best movies from a production standpoint. Not focusing on the story for a second, but the production value is extremely high here. Really good cinematography, even though it's minimalist in the way it's shot. But I think that the thing that draws people to this, and certainly what draws me to it, is the fact that this couple gets together despite the eyes telling you for a lot of different reasons that they're not a fit. We can get into this. I don't even know if it's because we all have biases internally or something. I mean, maybe, but I don't even know if that's the point. I think it's more around just like, if you create a story where there's no physical reason, why this couple should work, then you're able to do more interesting things with the story by making it seem natural that they connect, and by not really focusing too much of the story on the fact that they're together, but rather like all the other things that kind of happen around them when they do get together. And I think that's one thing that I love about it, is he just sort of goes with it. He's like, yeah, this couple just gets together, and so
it's shot as a fact. There's no
fact.
Yeah, it's just a fact that they are together. A lot of the times, as you said, in these kind of films, there's always the question mark from a filmmaking point of view, like, how am I going to display the question mark around why they're together? But with this, it's not done like that. It's a fact that they're together, and the rest of the film has to then deal with that fact.
They have a one-night stand, which is also just interesting, presented as fact, and then they wind up sort of falling for each other. So a lot to get into. That's my intro kind of thoughts, I guess. What about y'all?
This is my second time seeing this film. I did watch it. I know a lot of times I skip our film club picks when I've seen them before, because I like to have a week off, but I did purposely rewatch this one because it had been a while since I'd seen it, admittedly, probably about 18 months to 2 years. And I remember really liking it, and I wanted to revisit it, and I really liked it again. I think it's as you said, it's a very sparse film. There's not a lot of bells and whistles going on, but it works. But I also don't think it's as simplistic as we might sort of chalk it down to on first watch. Fassbender is very deliberate in how he films certain scenes. He does accentuate isolation by having sometimes characters shot, quite isolated in the frame, like when Emmy first sits at the bar when she comes into the rain, she's very isolated in the frame. And then other times, they're very close quarters, like in her apartment, which is very cramped, So I do think he's very deliberate in how he films scenes, but just it's not very sort of, not a lot of bells and whistles on it. I also find Fassbender a very interesting figure. I've actually only ever seen 2 of his films. This one, which I loved, and then I got a release back before Arrow started doing all their box sets. They had like individual discs for a lot of his films, and one of them was an early Fassbender set, and I had like 3 of his films, and I watched the first one from that, which is Love is Colder Than Death, and that film fucking sucks so bad. It's awful. It's a terrible film. It's like a student film trying to it's like a film made by a student who liked Godard way too much. So I hadn't really watched any of his other films since then, but he was an extremely interesting figure. He died at like 37 or something.
Yeah.
So he was really young, but like in that time, he made like over 40 movies, a couple of TV shows, tons of plays. Like I said, he was definitely a rebellious figure. He didn't conform to norms. He was a big drug user. He was bisexual. Like, did you guys know that he was in a relationship with the guy who played Ali when they were making this movie?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was him and Fassbender were in a romantic relationship at the time of this filming. And unfortunately, the guy who played Ali actually died a couple of years later, after they had sort of split up. So yeah, I found Fassbender a very interesting figure. I need to watch more of his films because I would assume most of them are more closer to quality that Ali is versus maybe Love Is Colder Than Death. But yeah, I love this film. I think it's a masterpiece.
So, for me, Chris, I know you said you've only seen a few, so it sounds like in this podcast you are going to be the go-to on the answers with Fassbender. This is the first one of his I've ever seen. It's the only time. He's one of those filmmakers I've heard quite a bit about, but it's kind of weird. Like I knew his name, I've heard of him in film circles, but I couldn't tell you a single movie he made. I had heard of like 8 Hours Don't Make a Day and
Yeah,
World
that's
on
one
a
of his
Wire.
TVs. They're
Yeah,
both his
I
TV
heard of his TV
series.
stuff, but when I was
Yeah.
going through his thing, I was like, I've never heard of his really a lot of his movies. So first impressions with him, kind of in general. I don't know if all of his stuff is like this, but I really liked the simplicity of the camera movement.
Yeah.
Like it's not boring. It's not in the state that it's just completely stationary, but it's incredibly simple. Like it does a lot with very little. Like just and those small movements that do make it brings attention to itself, but it feels so simple. So I thought that was really cool from that kind of standpoint. And I'm kind of curious if all of his stuff is like that. As far as the movie itself goes, I think it's interesting that when you're going to talk about something because obviously to me, a lot of this is about loneliness and that the looking into that, I think a lot of people get with people because of loneliness, and I think the focus on that being that while everyone else's focus is on they're not a good match, they're not the same age, they're two different cultures, they grow up in two completely different eras. That's going to be the focus for everyone else, but for them, it's just this idea of we both have suffered the same sense of loneliness, even if it's in different ways. And that's kind of their mending point, I guess. And I think the other stuff brings up, like especially the age thing brings up a good thing. Obviously, they're both adults; they both have a right to be who they want to be. But and that's kind of a thing. I don't know if it's everywhere in the world, but especially here in the U.S., I deal with it. Going back to working with kids. I have 17-year-old kids dating 14-year-old kids, and they're about to turn 18. That kid's going to be 15, and that becomes a huge issue. And this is on the other end of that. Sure, they're both matured and adults, but can two people like that really ever be with one another in that sense of way? Will they ever fully understand each other and have enough to talk about coming from such different backgrounds? And I think that's the interesting discussion. They find solace in the company while everyone else kind of sees the outwardness of it. So I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was really neat. It's a little bit depressing towards the end, but I liked it.
Really quick, since we're talking about Fassbender, in a weird way, one of the most interesting films I think that shows a lot about Fassbender and like the scene that he was in, and really kind of leading in a lot of ways. I think it was called New German Cinema. Forgive me, I'm not great with like movements, but I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, that would have been the same that like Wim Wenders and Herzog would have all come through the new German cinema.
Okay, great. So one of the other people from that group was the director and actor and just sort of talent called Uli Lommel. And he directed a movie in 1973, which was a year before this, called Tenderness of the Wolves. And it explores bisexuality, but it's a Jack the Ripper movie.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and it's a very weird movie. Definitely not for under 18, or definitely R-rated, if not more, in terms of some of the violence it shows. It's a crazy movie. It was an Arrow release, if that gives any indication. Arrow likes to kind of push some of especially early Arrow, they like to push some of the what's comfortable there. The film certainly fits into that, but Fassbender's an actor in the movie, and it explores a lot around bisexuality in a very matter-of-fact way. And it's a pretty metaphor, beautiful metaphor set in a very kind of exploitation heavy, violent movie. So Anyways, the special features give a lot of background into the movement and stuff. It was a really cool movie and an even better set of supplements that give some background into all that. So there's a point there. It's called Tenderness of the Wolves. As for this movie, I like the point that you brought up around loneliness. That's interesting as a reason why they would connect. Yeah, that really kind of resonates with me, I think, because even if you look at, so one of the things I thought was most interesting about the character of Ali, whose real name, hold on, I had it up and then I changed talking about Tenderness of the Wolves. What's his, if y'all can get there before me, what's his actual name?
IMDb just has him as Ali, so it doesn't.
No, it's El Hedi bin Salim.
Thank you. And I think that was his name in real life, right?
Yes, that's his real name. Yeah, that's what you were asking. That is both the actor and Ali's real name. Yes.
Yeah. And there was a scene. So there's no real like spoilers, right? It's okay if we just kind of talk openly about the movie.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a scene at the end, near the end, where he starts to cheat on his wife now, this older woman who he meets at the bar. Very much, I think, set up as a grandma. Like there's nothing really youthful about her. She doesn't have, it's not like she has a lot of plastic surgery to look younger. Like she's a grandma, right? And part of her loneliness comes from her family moving on and not having a great relationship with her and these things. And so they get married, and then he starts to have an affair with one of the women from the bar. And there's a scene where he like slaps his head and beats himself up and is basically like, come on, like you're better than this. Like you need to recognize your true love. And he goes, and I didn't know where he was going to go, but he goes back to the woman, his wife. And I thought that was so interesting because I that's just not really how I expected the story to go. Like, I think it's more natural to assume that he has an affair with this woman who's closer in age, seems to kind of understand him culturally. She knows how to make couscous, right?
It's all about the couscous. If only Emmy had just made him some damn couscous, none of this would have happened.
Right. But he's a man of integrity. And I think the way he's portrayed is like he sees himself as a man of integrity, and he has made a commitment to this woman, his wife, and he goes back to her, and they work on their, or he rekindles that with her, apologizes and rekindles that obviously before it turns again. But anyways, I think my point is just that was a bit of a surprise for me in that moment. And I was trying to figure out what are his motivations. And I wonder, it might be loneliness, or maybe we're not supposed to know. I mean, if we're just supposed to believe this is true love and he's just learning how to love this woman, I don't know. But anyways, I like the idea of loneliness kind of being a reason why he feels that connection to her, and maybe where that at least initiates from.
Yeah, and you kind of bring up the way I kind of see that scene where he's with the person who's younger than him, understands him a little bit better. It almost feels pressured for him. Like he feels like he needs to do this because that's what everyone else is telling him.
Oh,
that's the kind of what he goes through every day is, hey, this is, when you get told something every day, hey, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. I think at least part of you starts to believe that, or you work towards that realization because that's what everyone else thinks. And I think that's part of it for him is he has this connection, but he feel like, well, maybe I can, have this connection somewhere else and, not have the stigma with it as well.
Okay, so like I totally am on board with what you said. This is not a challenge to that, but you just got me thinking about this now. It's not like she's perfect either, right?
No.
I mean, she like parades him as this like physical specimen in front of her friends, right? And they actually like go up and touch him, and they're like, "Wow!" Like,
Yeah, she objectifies him.
Objectifies him.
Yeah. And and I guess that could, I guess it, it depends on if you're very cynical when you look at love, if you're very optimistic, if you're somewhere in between that. But there's always this idea you don't choose who you fall in love with. You don't make that choice. And I can't say how Fassbender feels when he made this, but I think there is some reality of that, where people put up with a lot because they say, I don't like that they do this. I wish they would change this, but I can't help but stay with them. And sometimes that's detrimental to them, but they still choose to do it. And that's where I think it kind of can come, looking at it in a cynical way, or you can look at it in an optimistic way. But I'll just add that.
Yeah, like unconditional love is not always perfect. Like I said, there is sometimes things that you don't like about that other person, but you can't help from having those sort of feelings. Um, yeah, like their dynamic is interesting. As I sort of mentioned at the start, it's displayed as a fact that
Mhm.
they are sort of together and that they have a connection, obviously on an emotional level. Um, Not really sure. Like we don't really know too much about the physical aspect. Obviously, we thankfully weren't shown a sex scene or anything between them, so we don't really know how it works on a physical level. But there's definitely an emotional level to it. They have a deep emotional connection. Um, you know, maybe it's just camaraderie. She's interested in him. She doesn't really, even though, like we said, there is moments later in the film, especially once things get a bit more comfortable with all the neighbors, she does sort of show him off. And that's kind of when he then goes towards having the affairs, when she starts sort of parading him as a kind of physical specimen or whatever, which has interesting ties to Nazi past, I suppose, which is brought up quite a bit throughout the film. But at the start anyway, she simply just takes an interest in him and doesn't really care that, that he's Arabic and that his German isn't perfect, and that he's much younger than her. Neither of them really care that much because they get on very well. And I don't know, like I have that relationship with some of my friends where we don't really have a ton in common outside of, we don't really have the same interests. Like one of like my probably my best friend, we don't really have the same interests. We don't listen to the same music. We don't really have anything in common hobby wise or job wise, but we just get on very well together. When we're in a room, we just riff off each other very well. And we always have. And I feel like that's the kind of relationship that Emmy and Ali have. They just get each other on a sort of non-superficial level. They just get each other.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. And one thing I do want to bring up, because you did bring up the Hitler thing, I don't know why, but the part where she mentions this was Hitler's favorite restaurant when they go to that Italian place, I think is the funniest bit of the movie.
Yeah,
Because
it's
I'm like,
weird,
that is
isn't
just
it?
so uncomfortable.
That sort of that hangover, that Nazi hangover, especially because obviously a lot of the characters we meet are quite older, so they would have grown up, in the Nazi era. Emmy herself mentions that her father was part of the party. He was a good Nazi. He's a good party member. So I think she says that specifically, something along those lines. So that kind of hangover from Nazism, it could even be a display of guilt as to why she, wants to treat Ali so well. It literally could be sort of leftover Nazi guilt over what sort of happened during that era with the racism and stuff like that.
Y'all have got me thinking. I'm loving this discussion. What if? Okay, bear with me. It'll be quick. What if this is all a metaphor, right? This is one thing I'm learning through the Jodorowsky films I watched last year, the Fellini films I watched. Sometimes, these artists like to use metaphor, right? A lot. Because she's representing, she could represent, she's not fully German, right? She's Polish, I think, or something, but it's even brought up the fact that a few times that she's not even fully German herself.
Yeah,
right?
going by her surname Kurowski, I would assume Polish or something
Eastern Europe or
non-German.
something.
Yeah.
So she's like an immigrant as well, but she's a more accepted immigrant, maybe because of her skin color, or maybe her German's a little better or something. And her kids are certainly, they're probably German. Like each generation probably becomes more and more German, so to speak. But then Ollie represents a lot of things that are brand new, like a new Germany almost, right? So she sort of is like a metaphor for like old Germany, both the fact that she's older, but also just sort of like her views, the views of her friends, especially like her peers. And maybe Ollie could represent sort of new Germany, where it's a different kind of immigration. A lot from the Middle East, a lot from Northern Africa. And there's a lot of tension in the country at that time, and even still today, around that topic of immigration, right? And I could see this maybe potentially being like a metaphor for like the marriage of these two cultures that doesn't make sense physically, but yet it's there as a fact. And this is sort of a representation of like what that looks like as these two cultures kind of come together a little bit, told through like one story as opposed to trying to tell the whole story of like the country. That tension is told through like one relationship, and we get to see it play out in one relationship.
Yeah, and I think one element that I think Fassbender did really well was he didn't harp on trying to explain their relationship. It seems like he is just trying to just put it out there because it would just really kill the pace. It's a pretty quick movie, all things considered. And it's like, look, either you're going to accept it or you're not. And if you're not, then at least it'll be quick. So I think it is interesting. I like what your point is, Chris, that it could mean a lot because I don't know a lot about Fassbender, but you guys kind of talked a little bit about him. You said he was with the main actor, correct?
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess there's an argument that he could be exploring that himself, like what he goes through, especially as a man who seems to have a lot of contradictions in his life from the little bit I did read about him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I suppose the only thing that stops me deep diving into, metaphors and stuff is the fact that, this film was essentially a remake of a
I didn't realize.
film.
Okay.
Did you guys know that?
I did not.
You guys, anyone seen All That Heaven Allows from Douglas Sirk?
Oh.
It's in the Criterion Collection.
No, but now that you say that, I remember reading a little bit about that. I forgot about that. Okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have the racial aspect. It's basically Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson get together, and Jane Wyman's older than Rock Hudson. Now, I haven't seen All That Heaven Allows, so I don't know how much of the other stuff that we see in the film translates around, people. I assume people disapprove of their relationship in All That Heaven Allows as well. The whole point is that, love is love or whatever. But I agree with you on the racial aspects of it. So obviously in All That Heaven Allows and Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson, they're obviously both white Americans, so that's not going to really play a part in that film. So I agree with you with the racial aspects. Absolutely could be, some kind of commentary, social commentary on, the changing Europe that happened in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, where, and Babylon kind of speaks to this as well, I suppose, where places that were traditionally white now have to learn to live in a more multicultural and more multiracial world. And that's not easy for some people, that's when racists and stuff lean their head in. But it's just showing that, it's a fact, it's here. It's something that you have to live with and get on with. And I suppose Ali does kind of show that in maybe a more cynical way, because people do start accepting Ali at their own sort of, they have their own ulterior motives. Like the shopkeeper is missing Emmy's business, so he starts being nice to Emmy again because he wants her business back. Her friends start being nice to her again because they need help with moving stuff and they know Ali's a big strong guy. Her son is suddenly now very accepting of Ali because he needs Emmy to start minding their child or her grandchild. Right. So everyone has their own, everyone wants their peace, everyone has their own ulterior motive to accepting them, but it's a step in the right direction in one way, even if it's not perfect. The age aspect of it, I'm not fully convinced is a metaphor purely because that's lifted verbatim from the Douglas Sirk film.
Good. No.
I'm not a big Douglas Sirk fan, by the way. I prefer this.
You're telling me not to be in a rush and watch this on the channel?
I know some people love them. Like it's very much they're melodramas, and that's what Douglas Sirk was known for. He was known for his melodramas. The one I've seen was Magnificent Obsession, which again was Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson. They seem to be like the two that he worked with a lot. I wasn't a big fan of it personally. I'm not in any rush to see it anymore.
I really struggle with Hollywood melodramas. I've been avoiding his movies. I know I'll get around to him one day, but it's like my least favorite.
I know a lot of people love him, but I agree. That's not really my cup of tea. That's what I liked about Ali is that it had everything, but it didn't have the melodrama. It was all it was told with a sense of verite, with truth, rather than
truth.
Melodrama.
24 frames a second.
Exactly.
Okay, so just really quick, I think just to end, I thought it was one thing I did really like about the movie as well is the title of the movie is Fear Eats the Soul, right? And that's a theme that Ollie brings up. It's like apparently like a well-known like idiom or saying in his country, or in Arabic culture, and then he ends up with something physically eating his body from the inside, right? And I just think that's worth calling out as like a nice artistic touch, because at first I was a little confused as to what's the point of the story, from why include his illness like in the movie and what that kind of meant. But I think it's just to show maybe a physical, I don't know if you have a different interpretation, but the best I could come up with was just like, it's a physical manifestation of what Fassbinder was trying to show through a lot of the movie, which is like how much of this guy's life is coming from fear.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose for me. It's very much jigsaw puzzle images.
Oh, we had to get images here.
Kind of thing. It's a little bit on the nose for me. I'm not gonna give out about it or anything like that. I suppose it's fun. It's nice to put these little motifs in. It's a little bit on the nose for me, but yeah, I get why. I get the decision. And now to wrap things up, we are going to go through any other business, which regular listeners will know, just a part of the podcast where we just talk about something that we've seen recently that we want to throw a big shout out to. I'm going to go first with mine because it's kind of topical. It's a new release, which is odd for me. I don't really get to see new releases quite a lot. But I watched The Batman. Yesterday, the Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson vehicle. I think this is one of the most overhyped films in recent memory. A lot of people talk this film up like when it came out. And I thought it was like, it's good. Like I rated it 4 stars. It's a good film and all, but geez Louise, it's very overhyped. I didn't think it was that good. I know you've seen it, Zach. But look, Pattinson's Batman is cool. He's very sort of gritty, a bit naive, beats the crap out of people. That's all nice. That's cool. Film maybe is a bit dark, and not dark tonally, I mean dark visually. It seems the sun never shines in Gotham at all. It's permanently either nighttime or overcast there. Nothing ever seems to happen during the daylight. So the film's a bit dark visually for my taste. But Paul Dano is awesome as the Riddler.
He always is.
He's a great actor. But he's genuinely, I never thought I'd be scared of Paul Dano because he just doesn't have that kind of face. I never thought I would be intimidated by Paul Dano, but he really gets into it. I read a thing online that said he went onto incel forums to help get into character, and he only had to be on there for a couple of hours to get what he needed for the role. It's
probably all he could take. He's like, you know what, I'm good.
I think he just went onto 4chan for a couple of hours, and that was all he needed for to prepare for his role. But yeah, he was awesome. Pattinson is a good Batman. His Bruce Wayne is non-existent.
I think that's by design, though. I will say that I think the biggest point is that he doesn't have this divide between Bruce Wayne and Batman.
I think it's a very important part, but I think it's a very important part of his character. This, the fact that, and I think this is even sort of mentioned at some point, but the fact that Bruce Wayne is the mask and the Batman is the true persona, but he never really wears the Bruce Wayne mask. He shows up to the funeral of the mayor, looking all emo and mopey, and doesn't really do any. Yeah, I think that I thought that was very underdeveloped, the Bruce Wayne side of things. But the film is largely good. It was entertaining. The score is basically in the Imperial March, but slowed down. So I don't care much for the score. I don't care much for hearing Nirvana 5 times in a film. The same Nirvana song over and over again. But
I do think they could have used all apologies at some point and replaced one of them.
Yeah,
gotta keep Nirvana.
Yeah, no, look, it's fine. I'm not gonna. It's not a bad film. I'm not gonna come out and say that. It's definitely not a bad film. It's definitely probably the best maybe of the DC movies. Admittedly, I haven't seen Zack Snyder's Justice League. I know you like that one, Zach. I haven't seen that because I can't stomach a Zack Snyder film for that long. I just physically don't think I could sit through it. What is it, like 5 hours or something
Yeah,
stupid
that's
like
right at
that?
4.
I don't think I could stomach that, to be honest with you. But yeah, Batman, it's fine, but it's overhyped. I'm sorry to say.
I will say I enjoyed it quite a bit, though I did notice, and I think a lot of it had to do with being in a crowded theater, because of course now theaters are getting more crowded again,
Yeah.
and so you're there with an audience, and so I saw it opening weekend, and that I think that does make a big difference. I did go see it again, like I don't know, like a week later, and my my rating tempered a bit. I think I gave it a 4.5 on Letterboxd, and I dropped it to a 4 because it is good. And I there's a lot of things Matt Reeves did that I think was great. I think I'm going to be a Giacchino fan forever because he did the score for Lost, and I could hear like some of the score from Lost in there. So that's always going to get bonus points for me. But beyond that, I like how he created Gotham. I thought that was the best Gotham has done since looked and actually felt like a city that wasn't Chicago since, I don't know, what, Batman Returns.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like its own thing. So that and I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it. I like John Turturro. I think it's how you say his last name.
Yeah, John Turturro. Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, he did great.
He was good
he was great in the role.
Yeah, he was good. He was. When I came out of it, and me and Neve saw it yesterday, and we were kind of talking about what we liked about it, and I said he was very good as a sort of mafioso. You don't really get to see him play that kind of role very often. He's never really like a.
Tells me you need to watch Miller's Crossing.
Yeah, I was about to say you have to go back.
Yeah, haven't seen Miller's Crossing, so maybe I do have to go see it then, because I've never seen him in that kind of role before. He's always
I think if you liked him in this, it's a different type of mafia thing, but he's really good in that too. So
okay, well I'll add that to my list then, because I need to watch more Coens anyway. So
how was Gollum as Alfred?
I liked him.
Wasn't really in it.
He's not in it a lot.
Yeah, he's not in it a lot. He's fine. You know, he's fine. He's not in it enough to say if he's bad or not, but he was fine. Yeah.
He didn't say anything was precious.
No,
sadly not.
Like
I think he was just excited not to be in like mocap or in makeup for once.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I'll probably see that one when it comes on video one day or something.
It might be pretty. It's a long movie. It's 3 hours, and it does feel it at times. Like, I like the pacing. It doesn't mean you don't feel it any less.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Zach?
So just to keep the train of new releases, Thursday night, I went to the first preview I have went to in quite a while. Of course, with COVID being here since last 2 years, it's been a little tough, but I got to been stoked for Ty West. To give a little background, I don't know how familiar everyone here is with Ty West, or the audience is. I became a fan of his years ago when he came out with his VHS segments, which I think are some of the best in that. And then he did a movie called House of the Devil, which is a phenomenal movie. Really great at getting an 80s aesthetic. He went from there and did The Innkeepers, which is good. And then he did a found footage movie called The Sacrament, which is just the retelling of Jonestown, but changed the names. It's fine. But it was the last horror movie he did, and that was in 2013. From listening to him, it sounds like he had difficulties making more horror movies. He kind of came in that Adam Wingard era where you had You're Next and The Guest, and of course he went on to do Godzilla versus Kong.
He was in You're Next, wasn't he? Didn't he act?
Yeah, Ty West is one of the spoiler. He's the first person killed in the house. But yeah, he has a small role in it. So he came from that era, but he never really captured the audience, like a huge audience like Wingard did. I think, when you look at Your Next, it was a huge success. It was a big movie where, while horror fans love House of the Devil, it didn't get that recognition. And I think that made a big difference. But he had wrote his new movie, X, first horror movie in 9 years, and sent it to A24 and said, I don't know if it's you guys' thing, but if it is, give me a call and we'll see what we can do. It's kind of his last hurrah to try to get back into horror. And obviously they made it. And the film is about these 6 people who want to go make an adult film. So they go rent a farmhouse, and it turns into a slasher film. So pretty standard setup, very Texas Chainsaw in a lot of ways. It is so good. Like, this is the highest rating I know I've personally given a film since Parasite came out. It's so straightforward. Like, I think a lot of people are gonna look at A24 and say, it's about as straightforward as it gets. It says it's a slasher movie. That is, honest to God, what it is. It's a slasher movie. It ticks all the right boxes for me. It's got this 70s aesthetic. It takes place in 1979. It's a stylish slasher movie. His shots look gorgeous. He knows how to build tension really well with them. He uses a lot of wide angles, which you don't see a lot in slasher films. He takes his time. I think, Adam, you've seen House of the Devil. He's very slow paced.
Meticulous.
Yes, it's an hour of basically a adult comedy, almost like Boogie Nights in a sense. So you get very graphic sex scenes, like pushing the edge of R rating about as much as you can. So if you wanted to go see this with your mom, I would consider not doing that, but you do you. The kid I sat to the second time I saw it was a 13-year-old kid with his dad. He has more courage than I ever would. But you do that for an hour, and then the last 45 is your slasher movie, and it is gory, it is violence, and it's what you want to see. It's so much fun. It's the best horror film I've seen in the 2020s, and it's the best one I've seen in quite a while. I saw it 3 days straight, and I'm so glad I saw it in theaters.
Wow,
nice. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I was just checking to see if it had found its way online yet.
I think Apple is getting it April 7th, from what I hear.
Perfect. That sounds great to me. I'll definitely watch it when it comes out, because I'm not going to get a chance to go. Even seeing Batman yesterday for me was a stretch. I was like, because it's just I don't have a theater within easy distance, and we're not driving yet, so getting to the theater is kind of tricky for me. So I probably won't get a chance to see it in theater. So I'll definitely watch it when it comes out on digital.
Yeah, and I do want to just real quick just say, this was a movie that ticked all the boxes for me. Please don't go in thinking it's going to be the best movie you've seen in 4 or 5 years, because I think I would be giving false expectation. It was just one of those rare movies where it's like, this ticks everything I love about movies.
So long as it's better than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then I think I'm going to be okay.
I don't think that's going to be an issue. I really don't.
Perfect.
If you tell me you thought Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 was better, I'll be shocked.
See, the thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 is that it's a shit movie, but I had a lot of fun watching it.
Yeah, I did too.
It's so stupid. It's the stupidest film I've seen in a long time. It is fun.
What do you got, Chris? You got something new? You're gonna dig in the archives here.
Well, I'm gonna latch on to the 3-hour thing as opposed to the new thing.
Okay.
That y'all have been going on. So I don't know. I don't even know if I can really highlight a new movie I've seen. This year for me is about getting through the 100 best Warner Brothers movies and that box set they put out. So as I have spare moments, I've been kind of working through that, and I'm pissed because they made me sit through a 3-hour war-bring psychological trauma movie. And the only reason I'm saying it like that is because Deer Hunter was a fantastic watch, right? There are really good movies that dig into the psychological trauma of war and how hard it is to come home and transition into real life. There's really good examples of that. I'm fine with the genre. I love the fact they're bringing attention to it. But The Best Years of Our Lives, I hate that movie.
I've never even heard of it. But
and it's 3 hours long. Yes. And it was the highest grossing movie of 1946. And it was this beloved kind of thing. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that the pieces of this movie are interesting. One of the main characters had both of his hands blown off in the war, and he has hooks. And so there's a storyline about him learning how to adapt to real life with his hooks and spilling milk and stuff and struggling with that aspect, right? And there's a physical representation of the traumas of war, right? And then there's another guy who has more PTSD. And so there's pieces that are very interesting. And I'm sure that audiences were loving this because it was maybe the first time that they've seen this portrayed on the screen, and they were just yes, coming back from World War II, and it was just so soon, all that was so raw, right? So I'm sure a lot of people were going through that. So I'm sure it was a very timely movie. But the thing I don't like about it is that they did that freaking Hollywood thing that I don't like, where for number one, everything wraps up nice by the end. And number two, they create story devices that are artificial just to like move the plot along. Like there's a love story blossoming, but one guy is married, so it turns out that his wife is an asshole and she divorces him so that they can get together, like that kind of stuff. But it's not done in like a natural way. It's done in a very
They didn't have enough
way.
time to do that. Like you felt like they had 3 hours, they'd have plenty of time to develop whatever they wanted.
Yeah. That was yeah, they basically had there's like 3 characters that it follows that are coming home, and like it gives each of them like a lot of screen time. Yeah, it just did not.
I noticed William Wyler did this.
Sure.
Yeah, like he did Ben-Hur. I know him from Ben-Hur, but I was like, oh, okay.
No,
I
great.
know from The Heiress. The Heiress is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, great crew. Really, really good cast. I mean, you know, Frederick Marsh is a great actor. I'm gonna get her name wrong. Is it Myrna Loy?
Yeah, I know Loy is the last name.
She's great, and she's good in this as
Dana
well.
Andrews in it as well.
You what?
Dana Andrews is in it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And he's fantastic in the movie as like, I mean, he's a good actor. This is what it's like 3 hours of what I don't like about old Hollywood movies. And the fact that it was that long as well, I just had to kind of sit there and just be mad at it for 3 hours. There's that joke. I forgot. I know we've talked about this The Office a little bit. I always forget if y'all have seen it before, but do you remember there's that one episode where Pam and Jim are getting married and they go off to this kind of hotel, and her grandma doesn't know how to work the remote, and so the TV's on and she's sitting there and she just has to like watch the TV, and one of the characters, I think it might even be Jim, somebody comes in and helps her.
It's Michael.
Oh, Michael. That's right.
Michael.
He comes in and helps her and she's like, I had to just sit there and let it happen to me. That's how I felt watching this movie. I like the completionist side of me couldn't turn it off, but I just like was all the reasons why I don't like these kind of movies, and it was 3 hours of them, so I was super pissed.
So that's a nice change for any other business. Normally we hear recommending you movies. Where Chris is now recommending you don't watch this movie. So
don't watch the best.
Don't take 3 hours of your limited time on this planet to watch this. Apparently,
no. It's ironic that it's called The Best Years of Our Lives because it's years.
So before we wrap up, then, do we want to talk about what we're going to be talking about coming up?
Yeah, so I will just say I also saw The Big Sleep, and that movie is all the hype. That deserves all the hype. That movie was.
Did you think that? I didn't think it was that great. I was actually very underwhelmed when I saw The Big Sleep last year. I was underwhelmed. Yeah, I thought
I'll watch it and break. I haven't seen it.
It was just one of those films. Even the screenwriter doesn't understand half the film. It was. I believe at one point someone asked Raymond Chandler, who wrote the source material, who killed X person because nobody could have done it and he didn't know himself. That's how convoluted the film is, that they were just killing people for the plot, but without even thinking about who actually did it.
The way that,
and you know, Howard Hawks, I haven't seen the movie, but I guarantee Howard Hawks didn't care either. He's like, nope, I'm not even gonna think about it.
I got introduced to the character Philip Marlowe through The Long Goodnight, or
Long Goodbye? Yeah,
Long Goodbye.
Yeah, Long Goodbye.
And so it was fun just kind of comparing Humphrey Bogart to Elliot Gould.
Yeah,
they play that character very differently. But okay, so yeah, let's do this. Here's what I'm thinking. So I want to propose this to y'all. One of the movies that we're going to talk about here on Reddit, Criterion, at reddit.com/r/Criterion Conversation, is Blood and Black Lace.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it'd be fun. You what?
My week off.
Yeah,
I've already seen it.
Right, exactly. So one of the things I thought would be fun to do is a Jalo week. And obviously there's like hundreds to choose from or whatever. So I was trying to figure out how to do this. And I thought, just for the sake of having like a really rich kind of fun discussion, I just sorted IMDb rating, and Blood and Black Lace is actually number 3. I was surprised to see it wasn't number 1. But I think it's just because Deep Red is more well known from maybe
it's Argento.
Yeah. I don't think Deep Red's a better movie, but we can discuss that when we go. So I want to propose we watch Deep Red and Blood and Black Lace.
Okay, so that's fine by me. I actually always preferred The Bird with the Crystal Plumage to Deep Red, so I feel like I need to rewatch Deep Red, because I always preferred Bird So I actually I've seen both of these films as well before, so I technically could take a week off, but I think I will rewatch both of them because it's been about
Actually, I just got the 4K, so I'll
Nice.
watch it.
Nice.
Nice.
I'm
cool
really,
with those. I'm cool with those. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
really
sounds
wanted.
fun.
Okay, great. I really wanted to do The Strange Vice of Miss Ward, but I don't think that's as readily available to stream, and I don't want to force y'all to have to buy The Severance. So,
I've never even heard of it, so yeah, it's probably a good
it's
call.
good.
Like
It's
I own both of the films. I own Blood on Black Lace and Deep Red, so that works for me. Even though I can stream Monte Arrow Player, both of them, I'm pretty sure. But at the very least, I own both of them as well, so that works.
Yeah, they released both because I have their steelbook for Blood and Black Lace.
Yep. Okay, great.
Cool.
All in. Well, then see y'all back in a few weeks, and with you're properly scared from all this Jala.
That wraps up this week's episode of They Live by Film. If you want to read more of our thoughts, visit theylivebyfilm.com. And you can also follow our Letterboxd, Reddit, and Instagram accounts from the links in the description. For now, take care.